Most people assume toxic individuals create problems randomly, but the truth is far more unsettling. They are often testing you. They quietly observe how much disrespect you allow, how quickly you react emotionally, and whether you protect your boundaries or remain silent. What many fail to understand is that toxic people usually follow predictable patterns. Once you recognize these patterns, you can remain calm, avoid their traps, and silently shift the power dynamic in your favor. At this point, encourage viewers to stay engaged. Before revealing the strongest way to completely stop toxic tests, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, because understanding human behavior can completely transform your life. Most people never notice the exact moment a toxic person first tests them because it rarely appears dramatic or obvious. It normally begins with something small, almost harmless on the surface, but psychologically it is extremely intentional. Imagine someone making a subtle, disrespectful remark, ignoring your opinion in a group setting, or pushing a boundary slightly beyond what feels comfortable. These actions are not random. They are signals designed to study your reaction. Toxic individuals are highly observant when it comes to emotional responses, and the first few seconds after their behavior matter more than most people realize, because in that moment, they are measuring you. They are silently asking questions in their mind. Will this person tolerate this behavior? Will they defend themselves? Can I influence how they feel? If you respond with visible frustration, excessive explaining, or nervous energy, they often interpret that as an opportunity to continue pushing further. This is why the beginning of any interaction with a manipulative or toxic personality can feel confusing. Their behavior seems casual on the outside, but the intention underneath it is strategic. The uncomfortable truth is understanding that some people are not interacting with you normally. Instead, they are studying your emotional limits like an experiment. Many people believe respect is automatic in friendships, workplaces, or social circles. But toxic personalities frequently see relationships as power structures, and tests are their way of discovering where they stand in that structure. They may interrupt you, dismiss your thoughts, intentionally delay responding to messages, or make jokes that slightly cross the line, all while carefully observing whether you challenge the behavior or quietly accept it. If the reaction they notice suggests hesitation, guilt, or a strong need to please, they silently remember that information and adjust their behavior in future interactions. This is why the first moments of these tests are so important. They create a pattern that can repeat again and again, often without the other person fully realizing what is happening. Over time, this creates a situation where the toxic individual slowly increases control while the target feels more uncomfortable yet struggles to explain why. Most people assume toxic behavior is chaotic or unpredictable, but one of the greatest advantages you can gain is realizing that many toxic individuals operate through very clear and repeatable patterns. Once you begin recognizing these patterns, their behavior stops feeling mysterious and starts becoming something you can predict. For example, a toxic person often starts with small provocations, then escalates if they sense emotional vulnerability, and finally steps back just enough to avoid appearing obviously wrong. This cycle repeats continuously because it allows them to maintain influence without openly exposing their intentions. Many people fall into the trap because they respond emotionally every single time, believing each situation is different. In reality, it is usually the exact same strategy wearing a slightly different disguise. Toxic personalities may use guilt to pull you closer, criticism to weaken your confidence, or confusion to make you question yourself. And these methods are rarely accidental. They are learned behaviors that have worked for them before with other people. The moment you begin seeing this clearly, something important changes in your mindset. Because instead of reacting impulsively, you start observing calmly, almost as if you are watching a pattern unfold in real time. You may notice how they interrupt whenever attention moves away from them, how they test boundaries after moments of kindness, or how they provoke reactions and then pretend innocence when confronted. Recognizing these signals gives you a quiet advantage because anticipation weakens manipulation. When you understand what someone is likely attempting to do, your response becomes more controlled and less emotional, and that alone disrupts the outcome they expected. Toxic people often rely on surprise and emotional imbalance. So when those two elements disappear, their tactics start losing effectiveness. Many people think outsmarting toxic behavior requires dramatic confrontation or complicated strategies. But in reality, the first step is simply understanding the pattern behind the behavior, because awareness changes how you react, how you speak, and even how you carry yourself during interactions where someone is subtly trying to gain psychological control over you. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone said something that felt slightly disrespectful, but you hesitated to respond because you were unsure whether you were overthinking it? That exact moment is often where toxic testing begins, and it is far more common than people realize. Many manipulative individuals rely on subtle pressure rather than open conflict, because subtle behavior allows them to observe reactions without facing immediate consequences. They may make a small joke at your expense, ignore you during a conversation, respond coldly after previously being friendly, or suddenly challenge your confidence in front of others. At first, these actions seem random, but when you look closely, you begin noticing that these moments usually happen when the other person wants to see whether you will defend yourself or remain quiet. The powerful realization in understanding this is that most people have experienced this situation before, yet very few recognize it while it is happening. Instead, people often question themselves, wondering if they misunderstood the interaction or if they should simply let it go to avoid tension. Toxic individuals depend on this hesitation because hesitation provides them with information about your boundaries. When someone repeatedly pushes small limits, they are not simply interacting casually. They are collecting clues about how far they can go with you emotionally and socially. You may begin noticing patterns, such as someone testing you more in group settings, making comments when others are watching, or trying to provoke a reaction and then pretending they meant no harm. These behaviors are especially effective because they place you in a psychological dilemma where reacting might make you appear overly sensitive, but remaining silent may invite more of the same treatment later. Many people relate to this internal conflict, and that is why recognizing it is so powerful, because once you begin seeing these moments as tests rather than random incidents, your awareness instantly increases and your reactions naturally begin to change. Instead of feeling confused or caught off guard, you start recognizing the intention behind the behavior and understanding the dynamic unfolding in real time. One of the biggest reasons toxic people test others is because they are constantly trying to measure boundaries, even if they never openly admit it. In many situations, these individuals view relationships less as mutual connections and more as environments where they can determine how much influence or control they can gain over another person. When they interact with someone new, or even someone they have known for years, they often begin with small behaviors that seem insignificant on the surface but carry a hidden purpose underneath. They may interrupt you while speaking, make dismissive comments about your ideas, withhold respect during conversations, or push requests that make you slightly uncomfortable. These moments are not always dramatic, yet they provide valuable information to someone carefully watching your response. If you immediately apologize, stay silent, or work too hard to maintain peace, the toxic person interprets that as a sign that your boundaries may be flexible or easy to cross. Over time, this encourages them to increase the intensity of their behavior, sometimes moving from subtle disrespect into more obvious manipulation, criticism, or control. Many people fail to notice this progression because it happens gradually, almost like a slow shift in how the relationship dynamic develops over time. Toxic personalities rely on this gradual change because it allows them to avoid direct confrontation while still gaining the advantage they want in the relationship. Another important aspect of this testing behavior is insecurity, because individuals who behave this way often seek reassurance that they hold a stronger social or emotional position. Testing boundaries becomes a method for them to confirm that they can influence the atmosphere of the interaction and shape how the other person responds. In many cases, their behavior is not only about controlling others, but also about calming their own internal insecurity. By seeing whether someone tolerates disrespect or emotional pressure, they temporarily feel more powerful or significant. This is why toxic behavior can sometimes appear strangely calculated. They are not always reacting emotionally in the moment. Often, they are observing, adjusting, and learning from every interaction. If they notice that guilt works on you, they may use more guilt in future situations. If they notice that silence makes you uncomfortable, they may intentionally create distance or emotional coldness to regain control. Over time, these repeated tests slowly shape the entire relationship dynamic without the target fully realizing how much influence the toxic individual has gained. What makes this even more dangerous is that many toxic people mix negative behavior with occasional kindness. After pushing boundaries or creating tension, they may suddenly become warm, supportive, or charming again. This creates confusion because the other person begins focusing on the moments of kindness while minimizing the disrespectful behavior. Psychologically, this pattern keeps people emotionally attached because they continue hoping the positive version of the person will return permanently. But in many situations, the kindness itself becomes part of the cycle because it lowers defenses and resets the dynamic before the next test begins. The strongest shift happens when you stop viewing these situations emotionally and start viewing them behaviorally. Instead of asking yourself why someone acted that way, you begin asking what pattern the behavior follows and what reaction they may be trying to create. That small mental shift changes everything because it keeps you grounded instead of emotionally pulled into the situation. Toxic individuals often expect emotional reactions, confusion, over-explaining, or attempts to gain their approval. When those reactions disappear, the dynamic immediately starts changing. Calm responses are powerful because they remove emotional fuel from the interaction. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain steady, observant, and emotionally controlled, it disrupts the result they were expecting. This does not mean becoming cold or aggressive. It simply means becoming aware. Awareness allows you to recognize manipulation before it deeply affects your emotions. And once you can recognize it clearly, you stop becoming an easy target for psychological games that many people never even realize are happening. In workplaces, friendships, or social environments, this can appear as someone repeatedly questioning your decisions, challenging your confidence, or subtly competing for control during conversations. The more information they gather from your reactions, the more they adjust their behavior to maintain the position they believe benefits them most within that relationship dynamic. One of the most effective ways to outsmart toxic people is something that sounds simple but is surprisingly difficult for many individuals to practice consistently in real life: emotional control. Toxic personalities often rely on provoking reactions because reactions give them information and, in many cases, a sense of influence or power. When someone reacts strongly with anger, frustration, defensiveness, or visible stress, it signals that the toxic